Okay, good morning. So we're about to make a conclusion on the tractate of Sotah. This tractate Sotah is the one we've been learning every morning at our Gemara class after davening. And yesterday, I'm skipping ahead a page. I went ahead, sorry, to those participants in the class. I went ahead a day. We'll go back after Yom Tif. But we've been learning it together for the last, how long is it now? 2 years almost. And it's a very beautiful and interesting tractate. The word Sotah, which is what the tractate mostly dedicates to, is this unique mitzvah when there is a suspected infidelity. If a woman is suspected of infidelity, there's a process by which she's taken to the temple and she drinks of a unique water in which is mixed or in which is erased a parchment that has verses from the Torah, including God's names, erased into that liquid. She drinks it, and then that divinely, empowered liquid will either prove her innocence or guilt. And that's most of the tractate revolves around that mitzvah. It's actually a Chabad custom, as is many other communities, that this tractate, which has exactly 49 pages, is learned between Pesach and Shavuos during Sfiras HaOmer, 49 days, 49 pages. And one of the ideas is because as we're preparing for Shavuos, right, Pesach begins the process that ends at Mount Sinai. And Mount Sinai is the marriage between God and the Jewish people. So we learn this tractate that forewarns infidelity, both literally and metaphorically, in our relationship with Hashem. Now, the tractate ends with a sort of social commentary on the nature of generations and as they pass from one to the next and things that change as a result. In fact, there's a whole section here, quite fascinating, which we'll get to in our Gemara class for the next coming weeks, where the Gemara describes prophecies as to what the world's going to look like when Mashiach comes. When you read the description, it's rather uncanny. You have similar sounds. For example, things like chutzpah yazga, audacity will become dominant in the days before Mashiach's time. Monarchy becomes disregarded, and there's no one to tell you who's morally behaving right and who's morally behaving wrong. These are the kinds of descriptions that the Gemara gives about our generation, about the generation before Mashiach. Sorry? Yeah, so in this context of the generations declining as time goes on, the Mishnah makes the following observation. The Mishnah's observation is Mishemes Rabbi, from when the time that Rabbi, that is the great Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, compiler of the Mishnah, who lived sometime within the century after the destruction of the second temple, the compiler of the Mishnah. So the Mishnah comments, Mishemes Rabbi, when Rabbi passed, Batla Anava, the Yiras Chet. The true humility and fear of sin ceased. That's the Gemara's comment. This is in the context of a number of such comments like this. When this one died, such and such ended. When this one passed, such and such ended. And when Rabbi passed, no more humility and fear of sin. Elsewhere, indeed, the Mishnah tells us that humility leads to fear of sin. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, "Anova mevila de yiras chet," that humility brings the fear of sin. So that's the Mishnah's closing line. The Gemara comments and says, Omer Rav Yosef Latana. Rav Yosef, who lived sometime after the Mishnah, he's what's called an Amoira, which means a scholar from the Gemara's era, which is post-Mishnaic era. Rav Yosef says, Latana, he's so to speak, speaking to the author of the Mishnah. Not literally, because he wasn't around when the Mishnah is being authored, but he's commenting toward the author and says, like Tisnei Anova, don't list humility on the things that don't exist anymore. V'ika no, because I'm here and I'm humble. This is what he says. We'll address that smirk in a second. Amalei Rav Nachman Latana, and Rav Nachman also from the same time as Rav Yosef, actually, both post the Mishnaic era, both Amoraim, both scholars of the Gemara, and he too addresses the author of the Mishnah who's no longer around, and says, don't include fear of sin on your list. Because I'm here and I have fear of sin. That's how the tractate concludes. There's lots to be asked and lots to be discussed on this little line here, beginning with the obvious question: what does this mean? Oh, don't include humility as something that doesn't exist anymore. Humility is alive and well. It's right here. Not a very humble way to put it, right? We'll address that in a moment. That's the obvious question that many ask. And another question that we'll address, and this is a little teaser. If you come to our Gemara class when we get here, we'll look at it more in depth. But the Rebbe has a beautiful talk analyzing these two lines here. And the Rebbe points out the following. Rav Yosef and Rav Nachman, these two sages in question. Rav Yosef saying, I'm humble, and therefore it's still around. And Rav Nachman saying, I have fear of sin, and therefore that's still around. These two scholars, Rav Yosef and Rav Nachman, were contemporaries, lived at the same time. So ideally, you would think it would be more appropriate, considering that they each know each other, that instead of commenting on themselves, they should comment on the other one. Rav Nachman should say, don't include in the list of things that are no longer the fear of sin, because my friend Rav Nachman has fear of sin. And Rav Nachman should say, well, my friend Rav Yosef is humble. Instead of each of them speaking to themselves, they should speak to each other. Or they should each include both. They can both say humility and fear of sin still exist because look, we are here. Why is it separated? Each speaking to themselves. And therefore the Rebbe argues that there must be an underlying difference of understanding. Rav Nachman says, actually fear of heaven is gone, or fear of sin is gone, but humility is still around in me. That's what Rav Yosef would say, I'm sorry. And Rav Nachman would say, actually, humility is gone, but the only thing that's left is fear of sin, and that's me. So to understand what that means, and let's begin with humility. Humility, as Chassidus explains it, modeled on the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu, who is described as a Anov Mikol Adam Al Pnei Adam, who is humble before every man on the face of the earth. So Chassidus explains, humility here does not mean that he doesn't know what his value is or he thinks he's worthless. That's not humility. That's either lying to yourself, someone who knows their value and makes as if, oh, I don't know that I have XYZ value. That's just lying to yourself, or probably more likely lying to others, right? Because deep down in your mind, you know that who you are and you know your values. So to say humility means to ignore your virtues, that's not the case. That's just falsehood. That's just dishonesty. Nor is humility to indeed feel really denigrated by oneself. That's just a lack of confidence. That's not humility either. So what is true humility? Explains Chassidus. Humility is to acknowledge what one has, knows their virtues and know their values, and to appreciate that whatever it is they have is a gift from Hashem. So to say I don't have the virtues I have, of course I have these virtues. I'm not a fool. And in the contrary, it would be ungrateful to Hashem, who granted you these tools, to pretend as if you don't. So humility is to appreciate what you have and to acknowledge that it's a gift from Hashem. And the way Chassidus phrases it is, Moshe Rabbeinu, where the verse says he was humble before every man on the face of the earth, would say, if somebody else were granted the gifts I have, maybe they'd do a better job. It's not me that did all these things. It's God granted me these gifts of prophecy, of wisdom, of whatever it is that Moshe had as qualities. And he would say, if somebody else had it, they might do a better job. And it so happens that Hashem chose me, so I got to do my job. But it's not as if I somehow earned that. That's what true humility means. And therefore, Rav Yosef is saying, you can keep humility on the list, because even the humility I have is a gift. It's not as if I earned my humility. This is the way Hashem made it. I have humility, so keep it on the list. Whereas his friend Rav Nachman says, the humility that my friend Rav Yosef has, he earned that humility. He earned it and he worked at it. So you can't really include it in the list. In fact, the fear of heaven that my friend Rav Nachman has, my friend Rav Yosef has, as a result of humility, mentioned earlier the Mishnah, which says humility leads to fear of heaven. My friend earned that. And real humility is the kind that Rabbi Yehuda had in the Mishnah, in which he didn't even earn it. It was all completely a gift. So in Rav Nachman not listing humility as something that's gone, he's not denigrating his friend Rav Nachman and saying, oh, he's not so humble. He's actually praising him. He's praising him by saying that the kind of humility he has and the kind of fear of sin that he has and the kind that's earned, and therefore cannot be on the same level as humility as Rabbi Yehuda, who can really say it's just a gift. My friend earned everything he has. And he couldn't really truly be humble in this sense as Rabbi was, or as Moshe Rabbeinu was, in that really nothing was earned, all just a gift. Rav Yosef earned his status. Therefore, I cannot say that humility is gone. This is how the tractate concludes. And of course, the lesson there is obvious. Number one, in the humility. In essence, now we see that they both have humility. Rav Yosef having humility, acknowledging who he is, and accepting that what he has is not his, it's a gift from Hashem. And Rav Nachman had the humility to look at his friend and see all these qualities and not say that it's simply a gift, but rather to look at his friend and say, oh, all the qualities he has, he earned all those qualities. He worked very hard at it. So when you look at your own things, it's a gift from Hashem. Look at your own qualities, it's a gift. You look at somebody else's qualities, you say, wow, look at that person, look what he achieved in life. And that's the true humility, and that's the proper way to view one's own qualities and another friend's qualities. With that, the tractate concludes, and we read, Sotah, and I need the Gemara so we can read through the paragraphs there. The lines I'm about to read are essentially a declaration in which I state my thanks for learning the tractate and my hope to return to the tractate once again. It's not in here. Maybe it's not here either. It's not on the screen either. I have the Gemara on the screen, but it doesn't have these phrases there. So apologies. Just waiting for the Rabbi. Yeah. هذا الله مسخ سيد بعد الله تعالى الله مسخ سيد تعالى الله الله نتاش مناخ مسخ سيد ولا كناش نتاش مناخ سيس مش مناخ من الله ما ديم الله بلا ما أصي هذا الله مسخ سيد هذا الله تعالى الله مسخ سيد تعالى الله سنيشي مناخ مسخ سيد ولا سنيشي مناخ الله ما ديم الله بلا ما أصي هذا الله مسخ سيد هذا الله تعالى الله مسخ سيد تعالى الله سنيشي مناخ مسخ سيد ولا سنيشي من الله ما ديم الله بلا أصي إذا تم فناخذ إن الله هين ولا هذا السين يشتري تراس مناسينهم والمزاء وسي إيمانه لا يلا محبا خلينا بابا رامي بابا نحما بابا أخي بابا أبا ماري بابا رافع بابا راخش بابا سرخ بابا عادة بابا دار بابا حاربنا عدنا لين يستبس سرخة بفينو وفي عم خبيش الشوف إني نحن إني كلنا ونحن بتساعدين وبتساعد عم خبيش الشوف كلنا يدش معها ولا يمدي سراس قبل تخمين مستخدم كل علم هي لي يلي بيسمى بخوكا الله ما له إيش ليس علم ليس أشكال بداخل تبام كيساني بارك خطأ دينا لم بني فكاخا أمين سلفات ما يدمن أخذ الله فنا خدنا الله هنا بدأ بسينهم شسمت خلقنا بيش في بيس متى شسمت خلقنا بيش كانس مش أنا ماسك في ماسك أنا ماسك بدي أتعرف ماسك بدي أتفرج تيلم أنا ميلم هم ميلم أنا ميلم مكان مساخر هم ميلم إن مكان مساخر أنا رأس بهم رأس أنا رأس مثلا بابا هم رأس في شاخص نمر بعد الله تردم في شاخص أنت من يوم ويأتي من يفتح باخ إذا سوف نأخذ نقول هاي كشيء مش زتاني لسان بس خسيته كنت زين أسمع صور ما خيرهم لسان ملهم الله من ليش ملاسس وكائن it's called to be something to be ava זכוס כל תנועים, אמרים, סמדך חכם יעמדו לי, ולזרי, שלסמו שעתנו מפי זרי וזרע זרי עד עולם. סקאי בהלכך תנך אויסך בשך בכך תשמע לך ותקצייסה היא שיחך כי בי יברי מחב יוסיף לך שני סיים אייכם מיני בשפש כבד מיני בשפש כבד ונגע זבתין נברך עמי והשלום סקאדה סקאדה שוויה בו Sean Rainbow Yasha, Mori Vakisha, a wonderful day, everybody. Have a jump this. I'm in Mitzrayim,